Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
She thought I'd be on my knees, but she didn't know what she'd walked into. My name is David. I'm 38 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon. I was in the middle of a sales conference in Denver. Just stepped into the hallway to take a call from my wife, Mindy. I figured she'd just ask when I'd be back, or if I remembered to pick up that dry cleaning before I left. You know, normal stuff. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 4, and our calls usually followed a script. Mundane, but comfortable. But this time, her voice was different. Flat. Cold almost. "I'm divorcing you," she said, just like that. No preamble, no, "we need to talk," nothing. It was like she was reading from a grocery list. Then she added, just as casually, "Oh, and I sold the house." At first, I thought it was some kind of sick joke. Mindy had a dark sense of humor sometimes. I even waited a beat, expecting her to laugh, to say, "Gotcha." But the line was silent. Then I heard her take a breath, and her next words were laced with this smug, proud tone that made my stomach clench. "Me and Craig need the money to start fresh," she added, like I was just some old piece of furniture she was getting rid of, like I was the third wheel in her life now. Craig. Of course. She'd been spending a lot of time with him lately, supposedly just a work friend from her new job. I'd seen the signs, I guess. The late nights, the sudden interest in her appearance, the way she'd always be on her phone, giggling, then quickly shutting it off when I walked into the room. I'd ignored them. Or maybe more accurately, I'd convinced myself they weren't what they looked like. Now, here it was, laid bare, delivered over a crackling phone line from 1,000 miles away. My hand clenched around the phone, my knuckles turning white. A wave of heat washed over me, a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated rage. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to ask her how she could do this, how she could be so casual about throwing away 6 years of our lives. I wanted to scream about the house, about our house, the one we'd picked out together, the one we'd spent weekends painting and fixing up. But then I remembered Mindy. I remembered how she always craved a reaction, how she thrived on drama. She loved to push buttons, to see people squirm. If I blew up, if I showed her how much she'd hurt me, she'd win. She'd get exactly what she wanted. And for some reason, at that moment, standing in a busy hotel hallway with conference chatter echoing around me, all I wanted was to deny her that satisfaction. So, I took a deep breath. I focused on the faint hum of the air conditioning, on the distant murmur of voices. I felt the anger still simmering, but I pushed it down, deep, deep down. My voice, when it came out, was steady, almost unnervingly so. It was calm, too calm, probably. "All right then," I said. Just 2 words. That's all I gave her. I didn't ask about Craig, didn't ask about the money, didn't ask about anything. Just that. I could practically hear her surprise on the other end of the line. The smugness in her voice faltered, replaced by a beat of stunned silence. I knew in that moment that she had expected me to plead, to beg, to be on my knees. Like the hook said, she wanted a scene. She wanted to see me crumble, but she didn't get it. And she definitely didn't know what she'd really walked into. The house wasn't hers to sell, not anymore. I'd had the title put in my name months ago during a refinance. She'd signed the papers without even looking at them. It was a detail, a small, quiet change, but it was everything. And she had no idea. She thought I was in the dark, but she never realized I'd quietly taken back control. That night I sat in the hotel room, staring out over downtown Denver. The city lights twinkled like scattered diamonds, but I didn't see them. All I could see was Mindy's face, smug and cold, and hear her words repeating in my head. I sold the house. My pulse, which had been racing since her call, was finally starting to calm down. But the knot in my stomach remained. It felt like I'd been punched. She really thought she'd played me. She thought she'd just ripped everything out from under me, left me stranded. And for a moment, a gut-wrenching moment, I almost believed it too. The idea of losing everything, of being homeless on top of being betrayed, felt overwhelming. But then, a memory surfaced. A very specific memory. It was back in March, just a few months ago. We'd decided to refinance the house to get a better interest rate. I'd handled all the paperwork like I usually did. Mindy was never one for details. She'd skimmed the documents, her eyes probably glazing over the legalese, and just signed where I told her to. "Just put your X here, honey," I'd said, pointing to the signature line. And she'd done it, without a second thought. What she didn't know, what she hadn't bothered to read, was that I'd quietly moved the house title into my name during that refinance. It was a tactical move, really. Not because I expected her to pull something like this, but more as a safeguard. Our finances had always been a bit intertwined, and I'd seen enough friends get burned in messy divorces to know it was smart to protect myself, just in case. I figured it would simplify things if we ever decided to sell, or if something happened to one of us. It was a practical decision, made without any malice or foresight of what was coming. It just so happened to become my ace in the hole. A slow, grim smile spread across my face. Oh, Mindy, you really had no idea. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Greg's name. Greg Davies. He was my lawyer, and more importantly, an old buddy from college. We'd met during orientation week, bonded over bad cafeteria food, and even worse dorm rooms. He was a good guy, sharp as a tack, and always had a knack for seeing angles other people missed. I dialed his number, my fingers still a little shaky, but my voice felt stronger now, more confident. He answered on the second ring, his usual cheerful greeting filling the line. "Hey, Dave. How's the sales conference? Closing any big deals?" he asked. "Bigger than you think, Greg," I said, and then I launched into it. I explained everything. The call from Mindy, her casual announcement, the bit about Craig, and especially her claim that she'd sold the house. I told him about the refinance in March, about moving the title into my name, and how Mindy had just signed without looking. Greg listened patiently, letting me get it all out. When I finished, there was a pause, and then I heard a low chuckle coming through the phone. It wasn't a mean laugh, more of a disbelieving, amused sound. "Wait, let me get this straight," Greg said, still half laughing. "She called you, told you she was divorcing you, and then said she sold your house? The one that's legally in your name?" "That's the gist of it," I confirmed. "Oh, Dave," he said, the amusement still clear in his voice. "That's rich." "That deal's already dead in the water. She tried to sell a house that legally belongs to you. That's like trying to sell someone else's car from their driveway. It's not just a messy divorce, buddy. That's borderline fraud, if not outright." My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from anger or fear. It was from a strange mix of relief and vindication. The betrayal still stung, a deep, aching wound, but the panic was gone. I had legal backup. I had the law on my side. "So what happens now?" I asked, leaning back against the headboard of the hotel bed. "Well, first off, any buyer she found is going to be out of luck," Greg explained. "They won't be able to get a clear title, so the sale can't go through. In fact, if they put down a deposit, they're going to be furious. They'll want their money back, and they'll probably be looking for someone to blame." "And that someone would be Mindy, right?" I asked, a new kind of cold certainty settling over me. "Precisely," Greg confirmed. "She took money for something she didn't own and couldn't deliver. That buyer is going to be breathing down her neck, trust me. People don't like getting messed with when it comes to big money like a house down payment." I felt a surge of something that wasn't quite happiness, but close. It was the feeling of a tide turning. Mindy thought she'd pulled a fast one, but she hadn't. She'd dug her own grave, and she hadn't even realized it. "What about the divorce?" I asked. "Should I file now?" "Hold your horses, cowboy," Greg said, a grin in his voice. "Let's let her make the next move. She initiated this. Let's see what she tries to do next. For now, you just focus on getting back home. When you do, we'll start preparing our countermove. We'll get this all sorted out." She thought she was being clever, but she just handed you all the leverage. I hung up the phone, a new sense of purpose filling me. The betrayal still hurt, but it was overshadowed by a quiet determination. Mindy thought I was in the dark, that I was caught off guard. She never realized I'd quietly taken back control months ago without even knowing why I was doing it. This wasn't going to be easy, but it wasn't going to be what she expected either. The game had changed, and she hadn't even noticed the rules shifting. When she walks through that door, she'll realize she's not the one holding the cards anymore. I landed back home in Portland 2 days later. The flight felt long, each hour stretching out, filled with my own thoughts, replaying Mindy's call, and then Greg's words. I walked into a house that somehow already felt colder, even though it was the same familiar place. Her scent, the subtle floral perfume she always wore, seemed to linger in the air, but it felt like a ghost. Her stuff was still everywhere. Her shoes by the door, her mail on the kitchen counter, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. All the little details of her life, intertwined with mine, laid out for me to see. But the air was different. It was like the illusion had finally cracked, like the thin veneer of our normal life had shattered, revealing the emptiness underneath. Every object, every piece of furniture suddenly felt heavy with unspoken betrayal. I dropped my suitcase in the foyer and immediately picked up my phone. I called Greg again. He answered right away, like he'd been expecting my call. "All right, you're back," he said. "Good. Listen, I've already been busy on my end. I notified the buyer Mindy supposedly found." As I predicted, they were shocked. Their real estate agent was pretty hot under the collar when she realized what was going on. Apparently, they'd already put down a significant deposit. My gut tightened. "So, they're coming after Mindy for it?" "Oh, you better believe it," Greg confirmed. "They're willing to go after her if the money isn't returned immediately. They've already threatened to file a formal complaint, possibly even a lawsuit if this isn't resolved within the next 48 hours. They thought they had a solid deal, and now they're in a tough spot." A grim satisfaction settled over me. This was exactly what I'd expected. Mindy was always so focused on getting what she wanted, she never thought about the consequences for anyone else. "We also sent Mindy a formal letter this morning," Greg continued. "It's a fraud warning, basically. It states that she attempted to sell property she does not legally own, that the title is solely in your name, and that any attempt to misrepresent ownership or retain funds from such a sale would be considered fraudulent and subject to legal action. It also demands she return any deposit money she's received from the buyer immediately." "She'll be pissed," I said, picturing Mindy's reaction. "Oh, she'll be beyond pissed, Dave," Greg chuckled. "She'll be absolutely livid. She thought she was so clever, didn't she? Well, she's about to get a very rude awakening. This letter is going to hit her hard. It's going to make her realize she's not in control here. She's definitely not holding all the cards." I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid swirling in the glass. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through me. It didn't make the hurt go away, but it dulled the edges. I knew she'd come storming in soon. Mindy was not one to sit on bad news. Once she got that letter, once she realized her grand plan had blown up in her face, she'd be here, demanding answers, probably trying to spin some new lie. I just had to wait. I walked through the house, the bourbon glass in my hand. Her photo albums were still on the shelf, filled with pictures of us, smiling, arms around each other. Happy. Or so I thought. Now, they just looked like artifacts from a stranger's life. Her favorite blanket was draped over the sofa. Her half-eaten bag of chips was on the kitchen counter. It was all still here, a physical manifestation of our life together. But it felt like a shell. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I wondered if she'd actually spent the deposit money yet. Mindy was impulsive. If she thought she had a quick windfall, she probably wouldn't have hesitated to start spending it. A new car, maybe. Or a down payment on a place with Craig. The thought made my stomach churn again. She was so brazen, so confident in her deception. The legal leverage was all mine now. She just hadn't realized it yet. She was about to, and when she did, it was going to hit her like a ton of bricks. I took another sip of bourbon, the liquid burning slightly as it went down. I was ready. I was completely ready. I knew she'd show up. Mindy never backed down from a confrontation. She thrived on them, usually. But this time, she was walking into a fight she couldn't win. She'd been so sure of herself, so certain that she had outmaneuvered me. It was almost poetic in a dark kind of way, that her own carelessness, her own inability to pay attention, was what would be her undoing. She was so busy looking for shortcuts, she tripped over her own feet. The waiting was the hardest part. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, made me tense. I imagined her pulling into the driveway, slamming the car door, stomping up the walk. I envisioned the look on her face when she burst through the door, clutching that letter. Part of me almost felt sorry for her, for the shock and humiliation she was about to face. But then, I remembered her casual cruelty on the phone, her smug voice telling me she'd sold my house and was running off with another man. And the pity evaporated. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. I checked my phone. No calls from Mindy. She was probably still processing the letter. Or maybe she was already on her way. I put the bourbon down and walked to the front window, peering out into the darkening street. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows. Any minute now. Any minute she would realize she wasn't the one holding the cards anymore. And I would be here, waiting. Her plan unravels in real time, and now she's the one scrambling. Mindy burst in later that evening just like I expected. The front door slammed against the wall, rattling the pictures in the hallway. She stomped in, her face red, her eyes narrowed to angry slits. In her hand, crumpled and shaking, was the letter Greg had sent. "What the hell is this, David?" she shrieked, waving the letter in my face. Her voice was shrill, completely unlike the flat, calm tone she'd used on the phone. The smugness was completely gone, replaced by raw fury and panic. "I can't sell the house now. Are you serious?" I stood calm. I was in the living room, facing her, my hands in my pockets. I made sure my posture was relaxed, my expression neutral. This was her show of force, her attempt to regain control, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. "You can't sell what you don't own, Mindy," I said, my voice even, almost bored. "The title's been in my name since spring. We refinanced, remember? You signed the paperwork yourself." Her jaw dropped. For the first time, her fury seemed to deflate, replaced by genuine shock. Her eyes darted around the room as if she was seeing it, really seeing it, for the first time. The crumpled letter trembled in her hand. You tricked me," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper now, thick with disbelief. The words seemed to catch in her throat. "No," I said, stepping a little closer, but still keeping my distance. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even raising my voice. This was better. This was colder. "I didn't trick you, Mindy. I handled the paperwork, just like I always do. You were given every opportunity to read it. You chose not to. You were too busy playing me to notice you played yourself." Her face crumpled, a mixture of rage and something else I couldn't quite place. Maybe genuine hurt, maybe just the crushing realization that her grand scheme had backfired spectacularly. But we agreed. We were married. It's our house," she stammered, her voice rising again, desperate now. "It was our house," I corrected her, my gaze steady. "Until you decided to casually announce over the phone that you were divorcing me and had sold it, also you and Craig could start fresh. You made your choice, Mindy. And that choice has consequences." She took a step back, as if I'd physically pushed her. "But the deposit, I already spent some of the deposit money." The words tumbled out, desperate and accusatory. There it was. Just as I suspected, she'd already started spending the buyer's money. Her impulsiveness, her certainty that she had pulled off the perfect betrayal, had blinded her. "Then you have a problem, don't you?" I said, my voice still calm, almost detached. "Because that money isn't yours. It's the buyer's, and my lawyer has already informed them. They want it back, Mindy, all of it. And if you don't give it to them, they're going to come after you for fraud." Her eyes widened, suddenly filled with panic. She looked like a trapped animal. "Fraud? David, you can't! You wouldn't! We're still married." "You said we're getting divorced," I reminded her, a slight edge finally creeping into my voice. "You called me to tell me that. You initiated this, Mindy, and if you're so eager to be done with me, then don't be surprised when I take steps to protect myself and my property. You made the first move. I'm just reacting." She started pacing, running her hands through her hair, her breathing shallow and ragged. Her plan was unraveling in real time, right in front of my eyes. All her confidence, all her smugness had completely evaporated. Now she was the one scrambling. "This isn't fair!" she suddenly yelled, turning to face me again, her eyes blazing. "You planned this! You set me up!" "No, Mindy," I repeated, shaking my head slowly. "You set yourself up." I secured my assets, just like any smart person would do. You chose to ignore the details, to assume you could just take what you wanted and walk away. That's on you. The air crackled with tension. She stood there, panting slightly, staring at me as if I was a stranger. And in a way I was. The man she thought she knew, the one she thought she could easily manipulate, was gone. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice low and tight, devoid of its previous anger. It was a defeated sound. "I want a clean break," I told her. "I want you out of my house, and I want this divorce finalized. As for that deposit, you need to figure out how to get that money back to the buyer, because that's your responsibility, not mine." She looked around the living room, her gaze lingering on the furniture, on the framed photos, on everything that had been ours. It was like she was calculating her losses. Her face was pale, and she looked smaller now, less imposing. The powerful, in-control woman who had called me in Denver was gone. "You can't just kick me out," she tried, but even she didn't sound convinced. "I can and I will," I stated simply. "This is my house, Mindy, legally. And you've made it clear you don't want to be here, not with me anyway. So it's time for you to go." The silence that followed was thick, heavy. She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. There was nothing left to fight for. She had lost. I knew she was beaten, but I also knew Mindy. She was cunning, and she hated to lose. I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd see of her, not yet. True to form, the very next day, she showed up with Craig. She still thought she had some kind of claim, some residual right to my home, even after everything I'd said. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Craig learns the truth, and suddenly Mindy isn't looking like the prize anymore. I was in the kitchen 2 days later, making coffee and checking some documents Greg had emailed me. The house felt quiet, almost too quiet after Mindy's outburst the other night. I figured she'd be back, but I didn't expect her to bring him. Then I heard the front door open, followed by footsteps. Not just one set, two. I gripped the countertop, bracing myself. And then, there she was, walking into the living room, bold as brass, with Craig right behind her. Craig. He was taller than I expected, with sandy blonde hair and a confident smirk on his face. He looked around my living room like he was doing an inspection, like he was sizing the place up. He even walked over to the fireplace, running his hand along the mantel. "So, this is the place, huh?" he asked Mindy, his voice casual, almost possessive. He didn't even acknowledge me, like I wasn't even there, a ghost in my own home. "No," I said, stepping forward from the kitchen doorway, my voice cutting through the casual chatter. I made sure my presence was undeniable. "This was my house, and you're not staying here." They both froze. Mindy's head snapped towards me, her eyes wide, a flicker of panic in them before she quickly tried to cover it with bravado. Craig, however, looked genuinely surprised. He hadn't expected me to be there, or to speak up like that. His confident smirk wavered. "David, what are you doing here?" Mindy blustered, trying to sound offended, as if I was the intruder in my own home. It was a pathetic attempt. "What am I doing here?" I scoffed, taking another step closer. "I live here, Mindy. This is my house. What are you doing here? And who is this?" I gestured to Craig, who was now looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "This is Craig, David." "You know, from work," Mindy said, her voice a little too high, a little too strained. She was trying to play it off, trying to maintain some illusion of normalcy for Craig's sake. "I know who he is," I said, looking directly at Craig now, ignoring Mindy. "The question is, what's he doing walking into my home like he owns the place?" Craig finally spoke, his voice a little less confident than before. "Hey man, Mindy said that she was selling the place. We just came to look at it. Look at it? I repeated, a dry laugh escaping me. Craig, Mindy doesn't own this house. She hasn't owned it for months. The title is entirely in my name. Craig's eyes widened. He looked from me to Mindy, then back to me, a dawning realization spreading across his face. What? She told me. She said she had a buyer lined up, that she just needed to finalize the paperwork. Mindy quickly interjected, her voice shrill. He's lying, Craig. He's just trying to cause trouble. It's all a misunderstanding. It's no misunderstanding, Craig, I stated calmly, pulling out my phone. My lawyer sent her a letter, a fraud warning, just yesterday. She tried to sell property that wasn't hers. She even took a substantial deposit from a buyer, money which she now owes them. Did she mention that part to you, Craig? About the money she owes? The look on Craig's face was gold. Pure, unadulterated shock and disgust. His eyes narrowed at Mindy. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He could see the truth in my words, in Mindy's suddenly pale face and darting eyes. You told me the money was for us, Craig stammered, his voice filled with a sudden anger directed solely at Mindy. You said it was a down payment on a new place for us. You said you had it all handled. Mindy started to panic, throwing her hands up. It was. It is. He's just trying to mess with us, Craig. He's bitter. Bitter? I asked, a bitter laugh of my own escaping me. You call me, tell me you're divorcing me and running off with your work buddy, and you casually mention you sold my house and spent the money. And I'm the bitter one? Craig took a step back from Mindy, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You lied to me about the money? He asked her, his voice low and dangerous. You said you had it all worked out. You said this was going to be our fresh start. Mindy's carefully constructed facade crumbled. She stammered, tried to explain, but no words came out coherently. She was trapped. I think it's time for both of you to leave, I said, my voice firm. You have no business here, Craig. And Mindy, if you don't want to face legal action for fraud, you need to figure out how to pay back that buyer. Now. Craig didn't need to be told twice. He shot Mindy a disgusted look. I'll be in the car, Mindy, he muttered, his voice cold. He turned and walked past me, his steps heavy, and didn't even look back as he left through the front door. He just wanted out. He wanted out of that house, and probably out of whatever messy situation Mindy had dragged him into. He clearly wasn't looking for this kind of drama. Mindy stood there, stunned, watching the front door close behind Craig. Her shoulders slumped. The air went out of her, like a deflating balloon. The bold, confident woman who had walked in with her new man just minutes ago was gone. What remained was a pale, defeated stranger. She slowly turned to face me, her eyes vacant. Craig learned the truth. And suddenly Mindy wasn't looking like the prize anymore. He stormed out after learning she lied about the money and ownership. My house had just become her trap. With her back against the wall, she finally sees what she lost. But it's too late. After Craig walked out, the silence in the living room was deafening. Mindy just stood there, staring at the closed front door, her face pale and drawn. The fight had completely left her. All the bluster, all the anger, all the carefully constructed confidence, it had vanished with Craig. She slowly turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed, a desperate, almost pleading look in them. The shift was jarring. She wasn't shouting anymore. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. David, please, she started, her voice cracking. You can't do this. We can talk about this. We can fix this. It was pathetic. After everything, after her casual betrayal, after her attempts to sell my house and run off with another man and his money, she was trying to spin it. She was trying to backtrack, to beg me not to go through with things. The audacity was almost comical, if it hadn't been so deeply hurtful. There's nothing to fix, Mindy, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I walked over to the coffee table, where I'd left the folder Greg had given me. I picked it up and slid the divorce paperwork across the table towards her. The crisp white papers seemed stark against the dark wood. You want it out. This is out. She looked down at the papers, then back up at me, her eyes wide with something that looked like genuine fear. Or maybe just the fear of losing everything. Divorce, she whispered, as if the word itself was foreign to her. David, no, we don't have to do this. We can work through this. Work through what, Mindy? I asked, a bitter edge finally entering my voice. Your affair? Your attempt to steal my house and my money? You walked away. You made the decision. You called me, remember? From 1,000 miles away, you casually ended our marriage and told me you'd sold my house for you and Craig's fresh start. Don't you dare try to act like I'm the one tearing things apart now. She went quiet, her eyes darting around the room, around the papers on the table, like she still thought she had a move left, like she was searching for an escape route, a loophole, a way to spin this in her favor. But there was none. She was legally boxed in. You really want to throw away 6 years? She said, her voice softer now, tinged with a faint accusation. It was her last-ditch effort, an appeal to the shared past, to guilt. You already did, I replied, my gaze steady, unwavering. 6 years, Mindy. You threw them away when you decided to betray me. This is just me closing the door you kicked open. She flinched. The truth of my words hit her hard. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and regret. She looked at the divorce papers again, then at me. There was a flicker in her eyes, a brief moment where I thought I saw her finally seeing what she had lost. Not just the house, not just the money she'd foolishly spent, but the life, the stability, the man who had always taken care of things. But it was too late. The emotional switch inside me had flipped. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed by a fierce resolve. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to be her doormat. She sighed, a long, shaky breath, and picked up the pen I'd placed next to the papers. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't hesitate. Without even bothering to read them, she scrawled her signature on the dotted lines. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud in the quiet room. It was the sound of a final, irreversible decision. She signed the divorce papers without even reading them, a clear sign of her defeat, or maybe just her desperate desire for this confrontation to be over. Are you satisfied now? She mumbled, her voice flat, lifeless. Satisfied isn't the word I'd use, Mindy, I said, picking up the signed papers. Relieved, maybe, or just done. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there for a moment, then slowly turned and walked towards the front door. Her steps were heavy, defeated. She didn't look back. The door closed quietly behind her this time, a stark contrast to her furious entrance. The dynamic had flipped completely, and she knew it. The woman who had left me on the phone, smug and confident, was gone. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was the clean break I needed. She lost the house, the money, the man, and now even her voice is gone. I spent the next few days systematically boxing up her junk. It felt strangely therapeutic, like I was physically removing her from my life piece by piece. My buddy Ray came over to help, bless his soul. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a stack of empty boxes. We went through everything. Her piles of fashion magazines, which always seemed to accumulate faster than I could throw them out. Her collection of fancy wine glasses, which I never really liked anyway. The weird decorative crap she'd made me keep, like that bizarre ceramic cat that always stared at you from the mantel. Into the boxes they went. Some stuff we just tossed. Clothes she hadn't worn in years, half-used beauty products, old receipts. It was all just clutter anyway. With every box we filled, the house got lighter, quieter too, clean. It was like I was airing out a room that had been stale for too long. The scent of her perfume, which had seemed to cling to everything, slowly dissipated, replaced by the cleaner, fresher smell of my own space. While we were working, Greg called. Just wanted to give you an update, he said. The buyer backed off pursuing fraud charges against Mindy. She managed to scrape together the deposit money and returned it to them. Took her a couple of days, apparently. Had to borrow from her parents, which I'm sure was a delightful conversation for her. A small, grim smile touched my lips. "Good," I said. "Less mess for me?" "Exactly," Greg replied. "So she's got no more moves. The house is officially, unequivocally yours, and the divorce is locked in once she signs the final papers, which I'll file next week. You're in the clear, Dave." "Thanks, Greg," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "You've been a lifesaver." "Anytime, buddy," he said. "Just remember to change those locks." He didn't have to tell me twice. The next day, after Ray had left and the last box of Mindy's things was stacked neatly in the garage, I called a locksmith. It felt symbolic, a final physical severing. New keys in my hand, new future. Mindy tried. Oh, she tried. For the first few days after she left, my phone buzzed constantly. Voicemails filled up my inbox. Begging, accusing, bargaining. Sometimes she sounded tearful, other times furious. She tried texts too, a barrage of them. "Please, David, let's talk. You can't just throw me out like this. I made a mistake, I swear. Craig means nothing. You're being cruel. I love you." I ignored them all, every single one. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't read the texts beyond the first few words that popped up on my screen. I just hit delete. Each time it felt like I was erasing a small piece of the pain she had inflicted. She'd lost the house, the money, the man. And now, even her voice was gone. I wasn't going to give her any more of my time or my emotional energy. The final text she sent, a few days before I changed my number, read, "You're going to regret this." I looked at it for a long moment. Then I laughed, a genuine, full-throated laugh that felt like it had been trapped inside me for years. Regret this? I was finally free. I finally felt like I could breathe. I deleted her number right after that, ensuring she couldn't reach me again. That night, I finally slept a full night in peace. No more tossing and turning, no more dreading the next argument, no more wondering where she was or what she was doing. Just quiet, just calm, just me, in my house, reclaimed. The wreckage was cleared. He's not just surviving, he's rebuilding. After all of Mindy's stuff was boxed up and the locks were changed, I started rearranging the living room. It felt like a fresh canvas. I ditched her trendy throw pillows, the ones that were always just for show and never comfortable. I rolled up the ornate rug she'd insisted on, revealing the polished hardwood floors underneath. It looked so much better. I pushed the sofa to a different wall, opening up the space. Then, I went to the garage and pulled out my old acoustic guitar, dusty but still loved. I hung it on a wall hook that had been empty for years. Next to it, I put up a couple of framed concert posters I'd had stored away. It was amazing how small changes could make such a big difference. The house felt like mine for the first time in years. Not just a place we shared, but a place that reflected who I was. My sister Paula came by a few days later with pizza and a six-pack of my favorite local brew. She walked in, looked around, and her eyes widened. "Damn, Dave," she said, taking in the transformed living room. "It's like she was never even here." "That's the goal," I replied, handing her a slice of pizza. We sat on the newly arranged sofa, eating pizza and drinking beer. We talked about her work, my job, and just life in general. She didn't press me about Mindy, which I appreciated. She just let me be. "You know," Paula said after a comfortable silence, "this place really feels different. Lighter." "It does," I agreed, taking a long sip of my beer. "It really does." I knew I wouldn't stay in this house forever. It still carried some old ghosts, some memories that would take time to fade. But for now, it was more than just a house. It was a symbol, not of the past, not of what I'd lost, but of survival, of resilience. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet, that I could rebuild. Later that week, I started making plans. Real plans. Not plans that revolved around Mindy's schedule or her desires. Not plans that involved compromising my own interests for hers. I looked into hiking trips in the Cascades, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. I contacted a few old college friends I hadn't seen in ages, just to catch up. I even started researching some online courses for personal growth, something completely unrelated to work. For the first time in years, I was making plans that didn't include anyone else. Just me. It felt incredibly liberating. I bought new sheets for my bed, deep blue ones that felt cool and clean. I decluttered my closet, donating clothes I hadn't worn in ages. I even started cooking again, experimenting with new recipes, something I used to love but had let slide. Every little change, every small act of reclaiming my space, was a step toward healing and independence. It was slow, sometimes painful, but it was progress. I was finally rebuilding. Nothing left of her but a forgotten picture in a drawer. A month later, I got the confirmation email from Greg. Divorce finalized. The subject line was simple, just case closed. I opened it, read the brief message confirming the legalities, and then closed it. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just a profound sense of relief. It was over. Truly over. A few weeks after that, while tidying up some old drawers, I came across an old photo of us. It was from a vacation to the Oregon coast, maybe 3 years ago. Mindy's arms were around me, her head resting on my shoulder. We were both smiling, big, bright smiles that, in hindsight, looked fake as hell. I stared at it for a moment, remembering the trip, the arguments that had simmered beneath the surface even then. There was no pang of longing, no ache of regret. Just a quiet acknowledgement of a past that was well and truly gone. I didn't throw it out. Instead, I just shoved it back into the drawer, under a pile of old papers, not as a memory I cherished, but as a reminder of what not to repeat. That Friday, I celebrated with Paula at a local bar in my neighborhood, a cozy spot with good beer and decent burgers. We grabbed a booth in the corner, and the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses filled the air. "You look better than you have in years, Dave," she said, raising her glass. Seriously, like, actually happy. I clinked my glass against hers. "Feels like I finally came up for air," I told her, and I meant it, every single word. The weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally lifted. I could breathe again. I could look forward. The conversation flowed easily after that, about everything and nothing. The future felt open, full of possibilities. I knew there would be challenges, that healing was an ongoing process, but the biggest hurdle was behind me. The final cut had been made, clean and decisive. I had closed the book on that chapter, carrying forward only the lessons, not the baggage.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.